What's good, Culturalists? This list is for the real ones who remember when that death row chain meant everything. Suge, Dr. Dre, Snoop, Pac, yeah, we know the legends, but what about the rest of the roster? The ones who dropped heaters and then faded into the shadows once the empire started crumbling. For this video, we're taking it back to the golden era and giving the Where Are They Now treatment on some of Death Row's forgotten soldiers as well as the major players. In case you missed it, our Death Row Raised Me tees and hoodies are live on the site. Hit the link to support the channel and rep the row. Now let's tap in and see what really happened after the smoke cleared. Let's start at the top with the man that made it all move, marrying Suge Knight. Say what you want about the man, but at his peak, Suge was the most feared and respected figure in hip-hop, period. He turned Death Row into a cultural juggernaut, a label that dropped classics back to back like it was nothing. But as quick as the rise was, the fall came just as fast. The drama, the beefs, the lawsuits, it all caught up. After Pac passed and Dre dipped, Death Row was never the same. Suge tried to keep the machine going and even attempted a rebrand in the early 2000s with The Row. It was supposed to be a comeback era, new energy and new talent. The roster had names like Crooked I, Eastwood, and even a young Lisa Left Eye Lopez before her tragic passing. There was buzz, but not much stuck. Whether it was label politics, bad timing, or Suge's rep catching up to him, The Row never got off the ground like it should have. Suge's personal life stayed in the spotlight, and not in a good way. Court cases, knockouts, bankruptcies, and a revolving door of legal problems. In 2015, everything came to a head when he was involved in a fatal hit and run on the set of Straight Outta Compton. That led to a 28-year prison sentence where he's currently locked up. Despite everything, Suge's impact on the game is undeniable. He changed how artists viewed power, ownership, and fearlessness in business. But that same aggression that built the empire is eventually what tore it down. Suge's story is a hip-hop Greek tragedy, a cautionary tale wrapped in the Death Row chain. One of the hardest female MCs to ever touch a mic, Lady of Rage came up under Dr. Dre and Death Row Records, making her mark with the classic Afro puffs on the Above the Rim soundtrack. She was supposed to drop her debut album under the Death Row banner in the mid-90s, but with Pac coming in and the label falling apart, she got pushed back like a bad lineup. Necessary Roughness finally dropped in 1997, but by then the Death Row machine wasn't what it used to be. After parting ways with the label, Rage kept rapping but also switched things up. She linked with Snoop, appearing in the Eastsiders movie and even rolling with the Dogg Pound collective for a while. But her second act? Acting. She had a run in sitcoms, most notably playing Coretta on The Steve Harvey Show. Yep, that was her bullying Romeo and Bullethead every other episode.
Nobody willingly supports my artistic vision.
She never fully left music though. Rage worked with Dre again in the 2000s and was featured on a few projects here and there, but no full albums. Health issues slowed her down in recent years. She suffered a serious stroke in 2018, but bounced back. These days, she's been more low-key, but every now and then, you might catch her pop up at a West Coast reunion show or an OG hip-hop event. Still one of the illest to ever do it, and if you don't believe it, go run Afro Puffs back one time. Classic. If you were outside in the 90s, then you already know Daz Dillinger and Corrupt were a problem. Backed by Dr. Dre's production and rolling with Death Row at its peak, the Dogg Pound dropped Dog Food in '95, one of the hardest West Coast albums of all time. Snoop's little cousins, well, not literally, but you get it, held it down during the Death Row heyday, beefed with Bad Boy during the East vs. West mess, and still managed to make classics in the middle of it all. After Death Row crumbled, things got a little messy. Daz and Corrupt fell out, dropped solo projects, and even dissed each other for a minute. Corrupt returned to Suge Knight's second version of Death Row, bad idea, while Daz went indie and made a bag selling music on his own. But by the early 2000s, they squashed the beef and got back to business, dropping Dillinger and Young Gotti in 01 and Cali is Active with Snoop in 06. Since then, they've been on and off, dropping albums, making guest appearances, and reminding folks that they're still one of the best duos to ever do it. Daz keeps it moving with production work, while Corrupt, well, he still raps, but they had bro looking crazy on that Marriage Boot Camp show. Fast forward to today, they're both still outside, and they just dropped a new album last year. West Coast legends, man, point blank period. What do you even say about Dr. Dre that hasn't already been said? From NWA to Death Row to Aftermath, the man reinvented himself more times than a rapper trying to drop a classic comeback album. But let's run it down. After Death Row fell apart, Dre hit Reset with Aftermath, and yeah, it was looking spooky at first, cause that compilation really wasn't hitting like that. But then Eminem happened, and suddenly Dre had the game in a chokehold again. 2001 dropped in 99, gave us timeless bangers and reminded everybody that Dre's ear for beats was different. From there, he spent the next decade turning Aftermath into a dynasty. 50 Cent, The Game, Kendrick. Every time Dre put his stamp on an artist, they took off. But what about Detox? Oh, you mean the greatest rap album never released? That joint became hip-hop's Bigfoot. Everybody swear they saw it, but it never actually showed up. Dre finally scrapped it and gave us Compton in 2015 instead. Solid, but let's be real, we still low-key wanted Detox. Outside of music, Dre turned into a full-blown billionaire. Well, almost, after selling Beats by Dre to Apple for $3 billion in 2014. Fast forward to today, and Dre mostly plays the background, producing when he feels like it, popping up at Super Bowl halftime shows, and giving beats to Kendrick and other Aftermath proteges. 2024, he was most active, dropping a collab project with Marsha Ambrosius and linking back up with Snoop Dogg for the Missionary Project. Dre's status in the game is certified and stamped. But we want to know down in the comments, where do you place him amongst your favorite producers of all time? If your favorite rapper ever had a hook that made you hit the meanest head nod, there's a good chance Nate Dogg was the reason. The man wasn't just a hook king, he was the hook king. Coming up alongside Snoop and Warren G, Nate carved out his own lane as the go-to guy for turning a song into a West Coast classic. From Regulate with Warren G to the next episode with Dre, his voice was the secret weapon on damn near every major rap anthem from the 90s and 2000s. But while the music was legendary, his health took a hit. He suffered a series of strokes between 2007 and 2008, which left him unable to fully recover. In 2011, at just 41 years old, we lost Nate Dogg, a huge loss for hip-hop. Even though he's gone, his legacy is untouchable. His voice is still instantly recognizable, and his influence is all over today's melodic rap hooks. Snoop, Dre, and Warren G still show love, and anytime a West Coast setlist gets made, you're hearing Nate Dogg's voice at least 3 times minimum. Rest in peace to a true West Coast legend. Nobody did it like Nate. Nobody.
Hold up.
If you were rocking with Death Row in the 90s, then you definitely remember Danny Boy's voice. The man was everywhere, from I Ain't Mad At You with Tupac to Toss It Up, and countless hooks that added that smooth R&B touch to the hardest beats. Signed to Death Row as a teenager, Danny was supposed to be Suge Knight's R&B superstar. But like most artists on the label, his career got caught up in the chaos. Despite having songs all over classic Death Row albums, his own album never dropped. He sat on the bench while the label focused on Pac, Snoop, and Dre. Then Pac passed, Death Row fell apart, and Danny was left in limbo. After leaving the Row, he stepped away from music for a while. He resurfaced years later, dropping It's About Time in 2010, his long-shelf debut album. Since then, he's been doing gospel music, running a soul food restaurant in Chicago, and sharing his wild industry stories. He's got plenty. Even though the industry didn't give him his moment, his voice is cemented in hip-hop history. Because those Death Row hooks, timeless. Before there was an R&B queen of Death Row, there was Michel'le holding it down for Ruthless Records. The first lady of West Coast hip-hop had a one-of-a-kind voice, soft-spoken when she talked, but when she sang, completely different story. Her '89 debut, executive produced by Dr. Dre, gave us classics like Something in My Heart and No More Lies. That project went platinum, solidifying her as one of the premier R&B voices of the era. But after Dre left Ruthless, Michel'le followed him to Death Row, where things got a little tricky. She barely dropped music, was caught up in personal drama with Dre and Suge Knight, and because of that and many other things, her album was delayed crazy. Her second album, Hung Jury, finally came out in 1998, but without proper backing, it didn't hit like her debut. After that, she disappeared from the industry for years. Fast forward to the 2010s, and Michel'le was back in the spotlight. First on R&B Divas LA, then with the Lifetime biopic Surviving Compton, where she aired out her turbulent past with Dre and Suge. These days, she still performs, but new music? Not likely. Either way, her voice is stamped in R&B history. If we're talking bars, Crooked I has been elite since day one. But being one of the coldest MCs doesn't always mean mainstream success. Just ask every artist who signed to Death Row post-2000. Crooked inked his deal with Suge Knight in '99, but like most artists who joined the Row after Pac, his album never saw the light of day. He had heat too, man. Tracks like Still the Row showed his potential, but label drama kept him in limbo. By '03, he was done waiting and left Death Row with 2 albums worth of unreleased music. But that's when he really started to shine. Through mixtapes, freestyles, and his legendary Hip Hop Weekly series, Crooked built his rep as a lyrical assassin. Then came Slaughterhouse, the supergroup with Joe Budden, Royce da 5'9", and Joell Ortiz. Their 2009 album put him on a bigger stage, leading to a Shady Records deal and their best project, Welcome to Our House. After Slaughterhouse fell apart, Crooked stayed busy, rebranding himself as King Crooked, dropping solo projects and teaming up with Joell Ortiz for albums like Harbor City Season 1. Dude never stopped rapping, and he's one of the best lyricists in the game. Death Row might have held him back early on, but Crooked I's pen was never in question. Alright, let's be real. Snoop Dogg is hip-hop's most famous uncle at this point. Dude went from Death Row to Martha Stewart's Kitchen and somehow made it all look smooth. Back in '92, when he slid on Dre's The Chronic, the world got introduced to that lazy drawl and slick delivery. Doggy Style dropped in '93 and Snoop instantly became a superstar. But after another album, drama at Death Row and the murder case had Snoop ready to bounce. And bounce he did. Straight to No Limit in the late 90s. Wild move at the time, but it worked. He dropped The Game Is To Be Sold, Not To Be Told, and even if it wasn't Doggy Style levels, it still kept him hot. After No Limit, he went everywhere. The Neptunes era gave us bangers like Beautiful and Drop It Like It's Hot. He beefed up his acting resume.
I can't believe this motherfucker had the audacity to come over my motherfucking house.
Coached youth football, dropped a gospel album, yes, really, became a reggae artist for about 3 months, all while still dropping music as Snoop D-O-double-G. And just when you thought he couldn't do more, he bought Death Row. Yep, the same label that once helped make him a star. Full circle moment. He's now the face, owner, and curator of the Death Row legacy, re-releasing music, adding NFTs, because why not, and bringing the brand into the digital age. He's also a podcast host, game show host, cookbook author, WWE Hall of Famer, and shows up on your TV every other commercial break. From Long Beach to global icon, Snoop did what most rappers couldn't. He never stopped evolving. Still cool, still relevant, and still D-O-double-G. If Death Row had a secret weapon on the vocals, Jewell was it. Before Nate Dogg made melodic hooks a West Coast signature, Jewell was already lacing G-Funk tracks with her soulful voice. She came up under Ruthless Records, singing background for NWA, and slid right over to Death Row with Dre. You can hear her all over The Chronic, Doggy Style, and soundtracks like The Above the Rim and Murder Was a Case. Her voice was the cherry on top of so many classics, she just never got the spotlight she deserved. Her debut album Black Diamond was supposed to drop on Death Row, but like a lot of artists caught in Suge Knight's mess, it never came out. By the time her music saw daylight, the moment had already passed. Jewell eventually stepped away from the music industry but re-emerged in the 2010s, sharing her story and pushing to release her shelved music. She dropped Black Diamond in 2011 and fans finally got to hear her solo work. Sadly, in 2022, she passed away at just 54 years young. A major voice in one of hip-hop's most legendary runs, and one of the many artists who didn't get their flowers in time. Rest in peace to the First Lady of Death Row. Before G-Funk became the West Coast blueprint, Second to None was already in motion. The Compton cousins KK and D came up under DJ Quick and helped define that early 90s bounce with their 1991 debut. Songs like Be True to Yourself and If You Want It were smooth, player, and straight up essential. While never officially signed to Death Row, they were definitely in the orbit, tight with Quick, connected to Suge, and heavily involved behind the scenes. They even recorded a full album for the Row called The Shit, featuring appearances from Quick, Pac, and Death Row's Usual Suspects. The problem? It got shelved like a lot of other albums during the Suge spiral. The project eventually leaked online and became a cult classic among West Coast heads, but to this day, it's never had an official release. Definitely one of those what could have been moments. They dropped Classic 220 in '99, and by then the scene had shifted. Since then, Second to None's been mostly quiet, doing occasional shows and guest spots, but no big comeback. Still, their impact is undeniable. Smooth vocals, funky production, and the shelved Death Row gem that fans still talk about. We want to know down in the comments, what unreleased Death Row era album are you still waiting to hear? Also, let us know which label we should do next. If you want more CT, check out our Where Are They Now Bad Boy Records here and tap into our Patreon for bonus content. It's your man CJ for Culturalist Theory. I'm out.
Y'all don't love us? Y'all don't love us? Well, let it be known.